A sensational confession before his death was made by American astronaut Edgar Mitchell on the air of one of the American radio stations. He stated that he had seen aliens on the moon with his own eyes. Several times we saw strange bright lights above the surface of the moon, and felt some strange noises in our head, like radio interference. It felt like someone was looking out for us. But every time we tried to turn around or figure out what was going on, everything disappeared. According to the chronology of NASA, Mitchell was the sixth person to descend to the moon, and there is no doubt about his competence. Edgar Mitchell has indeed repeatedly stated that he believes in aliens. According to him, they look like Earthlings of short stature with big heads. But he had never admitted before that he had seen them on the moon. Contacts with humanity began with the crash of an aircraft in Roswell, New Mexico. There were material fragments and bodies. And there are people in the government who have this information and this knowledge. It was a team of alien visitors, and they can still be here. There was an aircraft that was restored, the reverse engineering method was used. There is permission to duplicate these devices and its elements. There are humanoids from our planet who use such aircraft and equipment. Probably, most of the abnormal activity, which refers to UFOs, is not such at all, most of it falls on human activity. These are secret developments of the military. After the return of the Apollo 14 mission to Earth, the astronaut retired from NASA. In Palo Alto, California, he founded the Institute for Ethical Science. But "see" in Greek means mind. Mitchell began studying the possibilities of the human mind and searching for ways to establish contact with highly developed space civilizations. Unmanned vehicles from different countries have been flying to the moon for several decades. According to us, 12 American astronauts have repeatedly descended to the surface of the satellite. Why, in the face of fierce competition, the United States did not continue lunar missions and preferred to curtail the program? Our intelligence, military governments and all government contractors, including space, know about the existence of aliens. They know, but they are forced to remain silent. For a long time they were restricted by high-level prohibitions, which prevented them from informing the general public about what they saw. I believe they are still abiding by the secrecy agreement. Experts put forward a shocking hypothesis: the biggest secret of the moon is that it does not belong to us. In May 1961, the President of the United States of America, John F. Kennedy, presented the Apollo program to Congress. It was planned to spend $9 billion on the lunar mission only during the first 5 years. In the 68th year, a manned flyby around the moon was made. In the 69th, Neil Armstrong and Edwin Aldrin landed on the surface of the satellite. The space odyssey of the Americans, according to analysts, was surprisingly smooth. It seemed that the United States was about to announce the creation of the first lunar base in history, but instead, in 1972, manned spacecraft flights to the moon abruptly stopped. What prevented the Americans from building a foothold on the moon? According to one version, someone settled in there long before the Earthlings and advised the Americans to get out of their base. Instead of deploying alien spaceships, NASA is taking pictures of the moon, but it takes months before they publish them. They check them, decide what to show people and what not. Photos and videos are edited and retouched. If someone sees an object that looks like a UFO, NASA says, it doesn't matter. They've been hiding information there for decades. On the official NASA Internet resource, images appear on which researchers record dozens of unexplained objects. A transparent dome has been discovered near the Copernicus crater, from under which pulsating bluish light emanates. In the Sea of Moscow there is a giant geometric structure, very similar to a pyramid. In this image of 1966, something resembling a giant antenna is captured. It clearly casts a shadow. With the help of a system that searches through all the databases of NASA, the European and other space agencies, we managed to find something like a database. The buildings located in this square have semicircular domed roofs. It's amazing. And it can't be a natural formation. However, these are only fragments of the lunar landscape. According to Ken Johnston, a former employee of the American Space Agency, the true picture can be shocking. For many decades, NASA preferred to hide what is actually on the surface of the moon and inside its craters. I am the person who can prove that there is an alien civilization on the moon, and we have come into contact with it. I was the director of one of the departments of NASA. On duty, he had to destroy photographs on which, even with the help of retouching, it was impossible to hide giant buildings and incredible objects. I've been retired for a long time, and I don't want to hide the truth anymore. I have copies of many classified pictures. A former employee of the American Space Agency shared with us sensational pictures. NASA has never published these photos. They are made from the low orbit of the moon. They have never been retouched or processed using computer technology. Please note that in the lunar crater Asada managed to remove an object similar to a satellite dish. This is a surprisingly correct geometric structure, a strange spire or wall by the Sea of Crises. Structures that resemble dilapidated skyscrapers have been preserved in the Central Bay.
I remember one time we were drawing maps. This was happening in building number 30 of the control center. There was a 10 by 20 foot screen that projected images of runways and landing strips for ships going to the moon, the Canary Islands and everything else. We drew these maps. The work was very specific. That was the first time I was told about some buildings on the dark side of the moon. There were people who worked with these pictures. They received them in real time.
Some of the images, according to experts, clearly proves that someone is still using buildings and objects on the moon. This is not the legacy of a lost civilization at all. Where could this bright blue glow appear above the surface of the moon? It looks like evidence of the active life of extraterrestrial civilizations, as well as a chain of shiny balls above the surface of the satellite. On December 11, 1972, a shuttle Challenger with Eugene Cernan and Harris Schmitt on board landed on the moon. The research site of the mission was the Taurus Leader Valley on the southeastern edge of the Sea of Clarity. The lunar rover stopped near the crater. What happened next was captured by the onboard camera. Few people had a chance to see the shocking footage. The camera was fixed to transmit video to the Mission Control Center. Suddenly, an incredible formation appeared at the bottom of the crater. In the photo, the object looked like a robot's head, resembled R2-D2 from Star Wars. The lunar rover was supposed to go down to the bottom of the crater and take samples, but whether it was possible to do it is unknown. Data on the further course of the expedition disappeared. Even we, NASA employees, didn't have them. According to Ken Johnston, astronauts have witnessed the activities of a highly developed space civilization more than once. Neil Armstrong and Edwin Aldrin were the first to encounter alien ships. It's hard to believe, because about 500 million people watched the crew of the Apollo 11 spacecraft. On the 21st of July, 1969, a live television broadcast was organized. But there is a version that the astronauts during the communication with Houston still let it slip. The crew of Apollo 11 met an alien spaceship and it chased them. The astronauts contacted the Earth. They could not directly talk about UFOs on an open channel. They asked where the launch vehicle that launched them to the moon was. It is clear that they already knew the answer to this question. Thus, the crew reported to the base about an unidentified object that they were chasing. Few people know about the sensational discovery made on the moon by American astronaut John Watts Young. The commander of the spacecraft in 1972 was walking on the surface of the satellite when he noticed something sparkling under his feet. NASA prefers to keep quiet about the subject that turned out to be in the hands of an astronaut. The commander of the Apollo 16 spacecraft, John Young, discovered nothing more than a small processed glass prism in the lunar dust. The age of the lunar artifact is estimated at billions of years. This photo was taken in November of 1969. Alan Bean, a crew member of the Apollo 12 spacecraft, poses in front of the camera. Pay attention to the object in the upper left corner. What is this glowing ball? NASA was trying to find an explanation. It was also the moon dust on the camera lens, but all these versions seem unlikely. It is obvious that the unidentified object is located near the lunar module and seems to be watching the astronauts. During the flights of the Apollo space program, something abnormal has been interwoven more than once. Apollo 12 flew around the moon 3 times, all this time they were accompanied by 2 spherical UFOs. The Apollo 13 mission was completely unsuccessful. There is information that the spacecraft began to be chased by glowing lights. On the 13th of April, 1970, an oxygen cylinder suddenly exploded on board, and the astronauts were forced to abandon landing in the area of the Fermor crater. The leak from the balloon occurred in the Apollo 13 service module. Perhaps it was not accidental. The crew was supposed to deliver to the moon and detonate a small nuclear charge there. However, the astronauts were prevented from doing this by a technical accident or those who provoked it. No one tried to take the ship away, but the crew lost control. An audio speech was relayed to Houston. In Latin, the crew of Apollo 13 was ordered by someone to leave the trajectory and get back to Earth. As soon as the contents of the appeal were translated and accepted by the crew, control of the Apollo was restored. Recently, the United States of America started talking about a new lunar mission. However, this time they don't want to send people to the moon, but controlled avatars. High-tech remote presence suits allow scientists from different fields of science, astrophysicist, geologist, engineer, to take part in the space program. The project promises to be very costly. But it is unclear why create fantastic avatars, if even in the distant 60s Americans sent astronauts on lunar missions. Or are the people on the moon in too much danger? But why is the moon so important? Why equip expeditions there again? In fact, humanity today has a vital base on the moon in both the space and industrial race. There is a chemical element there that can radically change our lives. Helium-3 can become the basis of the energy of the future. It will provide Earthlings with environmentally friendly energy for 5,000 years ahead. For the first time, Professor Gerald Kalsinski from the Institute of Thermonuclear Research of Wisconsin was able to carry out thermonuclear fusion using helium-3 obtained from samples of lunar soil. There is not much helium-3 on Earth, only about 35,000 tons, while the surface of the moon is literally covered with regolite containing an invaluable isotope. However, the Earth's satellite has another mystery. Astronomy textbooks written in the 20th century say that the moon is a satellite of the Earth. There is no atmosphere or signs of life on this celestial body, but few people know that the ancient texts contain completely different information about this object. The works of sages written in Sanskrit have been preserved on the territory of India. In them, the moon is called Shashimandala. When the ancient texts were translated from Sanskrit into English, astrophysicists were amazed. Astronomical information was incredibly accurate. Modern astronomers were able to determine the distance between celestial objects only with the help of super-powerful telescopes. Where did these data come from? Ancient Indian scientists? But the most incredible thing is that hundreds and even thousands of years ago the moon was considered an inhabited planet. Outlines of dilapidated skyscrapers, structures of regular geometric shape, glowing objects. Maybe, in fact, the moon remained inhabited all this time. Someone has been actively using its richest resources for a long time and, it seems, does not want to share them with Earthlings. Modern astrophysicists believe that there is a core similar to the Earth's inside the moon. Moreover, Geological studies have shown that about 3 billion years ago the moon had its own powerful magnetic field. But why did it disappear? And how could this happen? Who could have settled on the moon long before us? Whose superfast ships were caught in the lens of powerful telescopes? On the flag of many states of the East, a star is depicted next to the crescent moon. This is how the flag of Turkey, Pakistan, Libya looks like. At least 17 countries have perpetuated the appearance of a bright luminary near the Earth's satellite. But what was the reason for that? According to one of the alternative hypotheses, the inhabitants of the Earth observed a shocking cosmic phenomenon that could have completely destroyed our planet if the moon had not intervened, which saved the Earth. According to one hypothesis, at this moment there was an explosion of a supernova located very close to the solar system. After this explosion, a KB-shaped nebula was formed, a gaseous nebula in the constellation Taurus. It is clearly visible through a telescope. As a result of a space disaster, the atmosphere of Mars was completely destroyed. A radioactive storm incinerated this planet in a matter of minutes. Incredibly, it was during the monstrous explosion that the Earth was protected by two celestial objects at once, the Moon and the Sun. Who protected our planet from the deadly radioactive front? Who was able to move celestial objects to the right place and at the right time? Do the masters of the moon have such powerful space technologies in their arsenal? Astronomers recognized the Crab Nebula as the result of a supernova explosion. This astronomical object was described by Chinese and Arab scientists back in the 1054th year. Maybe it is not by chance that in ancient times he was given such great attention. This phenomenon proved that the Earth is under the protection of a much more powerful civilization than ours. Analysis of samples of lunar soil showed that the moon is much older than the Earth. This object seems to have been moved to our planet. The moon does not rotate around its orbit, unlike other objects in the solar system, it seems to be parked near our planet. Russian theoretical scientist of modern cosmonautics Konstantin Tsiolkovsky left an important scientific prediction. He believed that in the future the moon would become a spaceport for flights of Earthlings to other planets of near and far space. There are indeed prerequisites for this. The absence of an atmosphere ensures perfect visibility of celestial bodies. The gravitational force on the moon is 6 times less than on Earth. This will allow launching huge spaceships to Venus, Mars, and beyond the solar system with less energy consumption. Observations of the moon with the help of astronomical telescopes of the Earth and unmanned aerial vehicles so far only raise new questions. The answers to them will be found only on the surface.